I was watching The Morning Commute recently, that distinctly American rush, and I noticed something unsettling. We are undeniably the wealthiest, most powerful nation in history, yet if you look closely at the faces of the people driving that economy, you don't see triumph. You see a frantic, bone-deep exhaustion. It reminded me of a stark juxtaposition I came across regarding two parents waking up in the same country at the same time, technically under the same flag. One is a white executive in Connecticut. His morning stress revolves around investments, ensuring his son has the right network to maintain their status. The other is a black mother in Alabama. Her morning ritual isn't about thriving, it's about survival, teaching her son how to de-escalate an interaction that could turn deadly for no reason at all. On the surface, they share a country. But the moment you peel back the layers, you realize they are inhabiting completely different realities. One is running to stay ahead, the other is running just to stay alive. And here's the twist that usually gets ignored. Despite the massive gap in their privilege, the system has trapped them both. Even the winners in this economy are terrified that stopping for a single moment means losing everything. It forces you to ask a difficult question. If the most privileged people in history are exhausted and the marginalized are fearful, is this success actually working for anyone? That opening really, it just perfectly frames this paradox we're all living in.
It does. You have this incredible national wealth, this engine that's constantly running, but at the same time, there's this universal anxiety. This exhaustion.
And national paralysis. It feels like we're stuck.
Yeah, completely stuck.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to try and get to the roots of that paralysis. We're looking at three really big interlocking forces that seem to be working against us.
Right.
First is the economic side, this relentless focus on individual accumulation and, the way the whole idea of meritocracy seems to be breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
Then second, we're looking at the decay of our social fabric, the institutions, the trust, all of that.
The glue that holds things together.
And finally, the polarization engine, the role the media plays in basically shattering any kind of shared reality.
And our goal here isn't really to, point fingers at individuals. It's more like a sociological audit.
A sociological audit, I like that.
Yeah, how did we get here? How did we go from a country that could, build massive public projects and unite behind these huge goals to a collection of isolated, exhausted people who can't even agree on what the problems are?
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with segment 1, the wealth paradox. It just feels so deeply ironic, doesn't it?
Completely.
We have the world's most productive workforce, generating unbelievable wealth, but the result is exhaustion, even for the so-called winners. If you've succeeded, why are you so terrified of failing?
Well, the irony, I think, is rooted in how we fundamentally misdefine success in the American system.
How so?
Success isn't about having enough. It's not about reaching some stable, secure place. It's defined by constant upward movement, relentless velocity.
Right, so it never ends.
It never ends. And success, paradoxically, doesn't bring you freedom. It just means you have more to lose.
More to lose. That's a powerful way to put it.
It is. Suddenly you have the higher status, the better schools for your kids, a much bigger mortgage, a professional network you have to constantly maintain. And all of it, every single piece, is tied to you continuing that relentless accumulation.
So there's this constant low-grade panic.
Of frantic anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
You have to keep running, not to get ahead, but just to stay where you are, to maintain your status. If you stop even for a second, it feels like you could lose everything.
And that fall is so terrifying because the safety net just isn't there anymore. The basic things you'd expect in a wealthy society.
They've been completely commercialized.
Exactly. They're not guarantees. They're products you have to buy.
That's the core of the trap. We're talking about healthcare, quality education, housing security, retirement. These aren't seen as public goods or inherent rights. They are commodities on the open market.
So if you lose your job...
You don't just lose your income. You often lose your health insurance. Your entire security infrastructure can just collapse overnight.
Which raises the stakes of just existing economically to an insane level. It's a matter of basic survival no matter what your tax bracket looks like.
Right. And when people struggle in that system, the narrative we're all fed is that it's a personal failure.
Not a systemic one.
Never a systemic one. And the psychological toll of that is just immense.
Yeah.
The system is telling you your exhaustion. That's on you. You're not working hard enough. Not, hey, maybe the design is flawed.
That reframing is so critical because it just makes us run faster, right? It fuels the very exhaustion it creates. To really get why the race feels so frantic, we have to look at the actual numbers, the true extent of wealth disparity. And specifically, we need to talk about wealth versus income.
Yes, this distinction is everything. It's a difference between salary and substance.
Explain that.
Okay, so income is your paycheck. It's the wages you earn every month or every year. Wealth, on the other hand, is what you own. It's your accumulated assets, real estate, stocks, investments.
And wealth is what gives you real power.
It gives you mobility and agency. It's the difference between being on a treadmill and having a parachute.
That's a great analogy.
The wealthy don't primarily live off a salary. They live off the returns from those assets, dividends, stock gains. And crucially, a lot of that doesn't even get counted as income in the way we usually think about it, which hides the true scale of their financial power.
So let's look at the quantitative side of this. The Gini coefficient is the standard measure, right? 0 is perfect equality, 1 is total inequality.
Correct.
Back in 1989, the Gini coefficient for wealth was 0.84, which is incredibly high.
It's extraordinarily high. And for comparison, the Gini coefficient at that same time was 0.52.
So a 0.32 difference?
That gap is massive, and it shows you how severe the hidden inequality was even 30 years ago. The concentration of actual economic power, the assets, was way, way more lopsided than just the concentration of paychecks.
But what does a number like that 0.32 gap, actually feel like for a regular person? How does it shape their life?
It feels like the deck is permanently stacked. I mean, income inequality means your neighbor might earn more than you.
Yep.
Wealth inequality means your neighbor is passing down a paid-for college education and a down payment for a house to their kids, while your kids are starting from scratch with a mountain of student debt.
That's the difference between agency and panic.
Exactly. It means the people at the top can influence policy, they can invest in technology that displaces workers, they can literally shape the rules of the game in their favor.
And this has only gotten worse. Let's talk about the period from 1989 to 2022, the wealth explosion.
Yeah, the scale is just staggering. Over that period, total U.S. household net worth grew by over $101 trillion.
$101 trillion.
But it's all about the distribution. Where did that money go?
Right.
So if you break down that $101 trillion in growth, the top 1%, they captured 35.1% of it.
A third of the entire increase.
Over a third. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of the population, half the country, they captured just 2.0%.
That is just brutal math. It's unbelievable.
It is. It shows that the system has this relentless, unidirectional logic. Wealth flows up. The top 1% increase their total share of the pie by 8 percentage points. The bottom 50% share actually went down.
So the people generating all this productivity are holding less and less of the actual wealth.
Precisely. And this is what sets up the crisis in the American psyche. This is the deconstruction of the myth of meritocracy.
That core belief.
That core belief that if you're talented and you work hard, you'll be rewarded. It's something Americans still cite constantly as the #1 factor for success. Hard work.
And this is where that anecdote about David, the young freelancer in Seattle, just hits so hard.
Oh, yeah. His story is the perfect reality check.
He did everything the American Dream manual tells you to do.
To the letter. Honors degree, moved to an innovation hub, he works constantly. But he's living in a state of what the material called high-functioning panic.
High-functioning panic. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
His exhaustion isn't just physical. It's this psychological bruising. He's playing a game, but the rules were changed and nobody told him. He's juggling jobs. A designer, a rideshare driver, a dropshipper.
He's putting in the hours.
Immense effort, both mental and physical. But he knows. He knows he's one medical emergency or one rent hike away from total insolvency. He is running as fast as he can just to stay in the same place.
And that meritocracy promise feels like a lie.
An active, malicious lie. And he sees it, right? He sees other people making 5 times what he makes for what looks like far less effort.
Because they're leveraging things he doesn't have.
They're leveraging assets, they're leveraging connections. It's not about effort, it's about leverage. The system rewards leverage, but it preaches effort. That's the disconnect.
And the thing we always hold up as the great equalizer, education, that's part of the myth too.
It is. We tell everyone that education is the path, but equal opportunity there is, well, it's basically a fantasy.
It starts way before college.
Way before. K-12 schools are so unevenly funded, based on property taxes, which locks in inequality from the very beginning. And then affluent families can essentially purchase the infrastructure of accomplishment.
What do you mean by that?
Private tutors, SAT prep, expensive extracurriculars, legacy connections. It's not just about the student working hard. It's about a massive parental investment that creates the appearance of pure merit.
And even at the very top, at the most elite schools, the material pointed out that admissions can feel like a random lottery among qualified candidates.
Right. If it were purely about merit, there wouldn't be any randomness. There would be a clear line.
Yeah.
The fact that there's a lottery at the end means they have way more meritorious candidates than they have spots.
So something else is the deciding factor.
Something else is. And when that myth fails, David, when it fails that student who loses the lottery, it has this devastating side effect. Self-depreciation.
Instead of looking at the system and saying, this is flawed, you look in the mirror and say, I am flawed.
Exactly. You internalize the failure. You think your status is because you weren't talented enough or didn't try hard enough.
Which leads to this erosion of the sense of self-worth.
And that makes the psychological burden so much heavier. You're not just running for economic stability anymore. You're running to prove your basic moral worth in a system designed to make you feel worthless.
Which brings us back to the exhaustion. This all feeds into itself. That economic anxiety and that personal blame. It would be one thing if we had strong communities to fall back on.
Right, a safety net of people, not just money.
But the data suggests that foundation is crumbling at the exact same time. Which leads us right into our next segment. The erosion of social trust in community. The idea of bowling alone, Robert Putnam's work. Let's start with this idea of social capital.
Right, social capital it's not just about, being nice to your neighbors. Putnam defined it as the networks, the norms, and the trust that allow us to cooperate for mutual benefit.
It's the grease in the gears of society.
That's a perfect way to put it. In a community with a lot of social capital, life is just easier. Problems get solved faster. People are more likely to see themselves as part of a we, not just an I.
But the picture the data paints is what Putnam called the Great Retreat, a long, slow erosion of the very organizations that used to build that capital.
The statistics are really striking. Voter turnout, attending public meetings, down by over a third in many cases. Union membership, which was this incredible force for bringing different kinds of people together.
A huge source of social capital.
Huge. And it's dropped by more than half from its peak. That's a massive loss of structured collective life.
And it goes way beyond politics and labor, even things like the PTA.
Oh yeah, the PTA. Membership fell from over 12 million in the 60s to around 7 million today. Groups like the League of Women Voters, the Fraternal Organization,
the Masons, the Elks, the Lions Clubs.
All of them saw huge drops. And these were places where a banker and a mechanic might actually interact as equals, sharing a common purpose. When those places vanish, so do those kinds of interactions.
Which brings us to that famous metaphor, the bowling league.
Right.
Between 1980 and 1993, the total number of people bowling in America actually went up, but the number of people bowling in organized leagues just plummeted by 40%.
It's the perfect symbol for the whole trend. It's a shift from communal to individualized leisure.
More people in the building, but they're not talking to each other.
Exactly. They're not building networks or trust. And that creates what's called a third place vacuum, a lack of those informal public gathering spots.
And we see the psychological cost of this in that anecdote about Linda, the woman in the wealthy Atlanta suburb.
Yes. Linda is someone who, on paper, has won the game. She has material success, but she's suffering from profound atomization and anomie.
Let's break down those two terms, atomization and anomie.
Atomization is just what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Society breaking down into isolated, disconnected individuals, or atoms. And anomie is a sociological term for a state of normlessness, a lack of social bonds and shared ethical standards.
So Linda's in this big, beautiful house, but she's completely alone.
She is. Her life used to be structured around those institutions we just talked about. The union hall, the church social, the local civic league. Now they're gone, or they've moved online.
And what happens when her individual success isn't enough? When something goes wrong?
Well, the story tells us a storm knocks out her power.
Right.
In a neighborhood with high social capital, that's a minor problem. Neighbors check on each other, they share generators, they barbecue with the food that's about to go bad.
It becomes a community event.
You can, yeah. But for Linda, it was a moment of crisis. She realized she was totally isolated. She didn't know her neighbors well enough to ask for help. Her wealth provided zero protection against social isolation.
And that's the tragedy. You have the resources to survive, but not the community you need to thrive.
And when that community disappears, trust disappears with it. And we can actually quantify this decline in social trust.
The numbers on this are just They're unforgiving.
They are. The percentage of Americans who say most people can be trusted fell from 58% in 1960 to 34% in recent years.
We've lost almost half of our basic generalized faith in each other.
We have. And you have to understand what we lose when that happens. There's something called the virtuous circle of trust.
What's that?
It just means that when trust is high, everything in society works with less friction. People are more likely to help a neighbor, volunteer, conserve public resources.
It lowers the transaction cost of life.
Perfectly said. You don't need a lawyer and a 10-page contract to organize a neighborhood cleanup. A handshake works. And people in high-trust societies consistently report being happier and more satisfied with their lives.
So when trust goes down, anxiety goes up. And we start to see these deep disparities in who trusts and who doesn't.
Yeah, the data shows that low trust correlates with lower income and education. But more importantly, the racial and ethnic gaps are significant.
Black and Hispanic adults express trust at about half the rate of white and Asian adults.
Right, about 23% versus around 40%.
Yeah.
And that gap remains even when you control for things like income.
So what does that tell us? It's not just about money.
It's not. It suggests that the lived experience of systemic discrimination by institutions, by the justice system, in daily interactions, has a powerful, lasting effect on your willingness to extend trust to society at large. The system has repeatedly proven itself untrustworthy.
This all connects back to a warning from, almost 200 years ago, Tocqueville.
Tocqueville's warning, yes. He predicted that democratic societies would tend toward a kind of individualism that would lead people to detach from the wider community.
And he said that when our mediating institutions, those voluntary clubs and associations, weaken, people are left isolated.
They're left alone. And he said they would willingly abandon society at large to itself.
And what fills that void? Wow. When community and connection are gone, what becomes the most important value?
Money. A recent poll showed that over the last 25 years, the only value that Americans said became more important to them was money.
Wow.
Meanwhile, things like community involvement and tolerance for others declined significantly.
So it's a feedback loop.
It's a perfect self-fulfilling prophecy. You're socially isolated, so you have to rely on money for your security, which makes money the most important thing, which further encourages you to focus on individual accumulation instead of community building.
And you're left exhausted, fearful, and, as Tocqueville warned, ultimately more vulnerable and less free.
Exactly.
So we've got the economic exhaustion and the social isolation. The final piece of the puzzle is, what are these isolated, exhausted people being told? Where do they get their information?
If you don't have a shared physical space, you don't have shared trust, how can you possibly have a shared reality?
You can't.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the final gear in this machine, the Polarization Engine.
Mm-hmm.
And this section is grounded in some really interesting quantitative research, looking at the causal link between media polarization and political polarization.
Yes, this was a really novel study. They did a textual analysis of millions and millions of words.
From where?
From members of Congress on the one hand, and from major media outlets, specifically Fox News and CNN on the other, from 2013 to 2021.
And the goal was to see if the media is just reflecting a divide that's already there, or if it's actually causing it.
That causal link is the key. And they measured it by looking at language patterns, specifically three-word phrases or trigrams.
Why trigrams?
Because they're really good at revealing context and thematic focus. They built an index to see how often a politician's language mirrored the language of their party's preferred media outlet.
And what did they find?
They found a positive, statistically significant causal relationship.
Meaning?
Meaning rising media polarization causes an increase in political polarization.
Mm-hmm.
For every 1 point jump in media polarization, political polarization goes up by about 0.40 points.
Okay, so that number, that 0.40, is concrete proof. The media isn't just a mirror, it's an engine. It's actively driving the separation.
It is. It's providing politicians with the rhetorical ammunition. They're learning to speak the language that their media has already taught their audience to understand and to reward.
And you can see this in the specific examples of language they pulled out.
Oh, absolutely. In Congress, you'd see Democrats using very specific issue-based language, like the phrase Justice Policing Act.
While Republicans would be using totally different frames, different language.
They weren't even debating the same topic with the same set of terms. And in the media, it was even clearer. CNN would show a huge statistical focus on phrases like assault-style rifles.
And Fox News.
Fox News would have this intense, ongoing fixation on things like the Benghazi attack, These aren't just different news stories. They are different emotional touchstones designed to activate a very specific base.
They're creating different worlds.
Completely different worlds. And that linguistic gap gets amplified 1,000 times over by the digital divide, by the echo chambers and filter bubbles of social media.
The algorithms.
The algorithms are designed for one thing: engagement. And the easiest way to get engagement is to show you things you already agree with and things that make you angry at the other side.
They actively wall you off from different perspectives.
Which just accelerates the spread of misinformation and kills trust. Right. It's so much easier to share some unverified, emotionally charged meme that confirms your bias than it is to read a nuanced, complex article.
And this connects right back to what we were saying about social trust. If you already don't trust most people,
you're definitely not going to trust their news sources or the institutions they believe in. It's a total cascade failure of trust. There's no longer a shared, legitimate source of truth we can all turn to.
Which creates this vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. The more polarized we get, the less we think we have in common with the other side.
And since we're already bowling alone, we don't have those real-world interactions with people who think differently to prove the digital caricature is wrong.
We've sorted ourselves geographically and politically, so the only information we get about the other side is often the most extreme version from our preferred media source.
Precisely.
And the ultimate cost of all this, the real-world consequence, is the total failure of collective action.
This is summed up perfectly in that story of the town council meeting in Ohio about the bridge. That story is a perfect microcosm of the entire American failure.
It should have been so simple.
It was about cement and steel. A local bridge needed fixing. A basic, nonpartisan civic duty. But the meeting just instantly devolved into a shouting match about national politics.
You had Brenda, who was convinced that the local bond to fix the bridge was some kind of Trojan horse for federal overreach.
Because that's the narrative she's consuming every single day from her media sources. She's seeing a hidden national agenda in a local infrastructure project.
And on the other side, you had Mark, and he didn't see Brenda as a concerned neighbor. He saw her as an active agent of fascism that he had to defeat.
Because that's the narrative he's consuming. So you have Mark and Brenda living in the same town, needing the same bridge, but they're operating in two completely different epistemic realities.
They can't agree on basic facts. They're too exhausted from fighting this high-stakes national political war to solve a simple local problem.
And the outcome was inevitable.
The bridge never got fixed.
The bridge never got fixed. The town's ability to solve its own problems was completely shattered. And that brings us right back to the exhaustion we started with. The wealthiest, most productive nation in history is becoming incapable of paving its own roads because its citizens are locked in this constant, draining emotional combat over the nature of reality itself. So this deep dive, it's really revealed these interlocking forces that have us in this trap. The economic system, with its meritocracy myth, breeds anxiety and exhaustion. And that happens at the same time that our social connections are dissolving, which fosters this deep isolation and collapse in trust.
And that exhausted, isolated state is the perfect environment for these targeted media narratives to just thrive by selling us division.
They monetize division. And the three forces, accumulation, atomization, and media division, they work together to make any kind of collective action impossible. We can't agree on a solution because we can't even agree on what the problem is.
And the really crucial insight here is that these structural problems affect everyone.
Everyone. From the executive in Connecticut who's running just to stay ahead, to the mother in Alabama who's running just to keep her son alive. Their realities are worlds apart, but they're both trapped in this high-pressure, low-support system.
The greatest challenge we face, then, may not be the economic gap between us, as huge as that is.
It's the erosion of the shared psychological and social infrastructure we need to even see each other as being in the same boat. It's the collapse of our ability to recognize that everyone, regardless of their reality, is ultimately bound together by the rising stakes of this systemic decay.